Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sam Kimmer, and I'm the manager of the CSU Advancement Academy, which is a close partner of the CSU Events Professionals Network. Welcome to this month's on-call meeting, when we'll discuss hybrid events with a panel and audience discussion. Quite frankly, I think we'll only scratch the surface of all the fun topics that there are to discuss when it comes to hybrid events, but we have the end goal of hopefully providing the audience and our viewers with some understanding of what the events are, and what are some ways to make them successful. On Call is a series of monthly roundtable meetings offered by the CSUEPN in partnership again with the CSU Advancement Academy to provide a space for events professionals working in higher education to explore trending topics with colleagues. Each month's roundtable is focused on a different topic. Moving on, I'll share that this is going to be the last on call for the near future. The CSU EPN's Executive Council will spend the next few months working very diligently to put together a strong program for our conference this summer. And the on-call series will return in the fall, where we will continue to explore current topics of interest to events professionals. On Call is just one of the few value-added benefits of being part of the CSU EPN. We also provide a listserv, which is a big email forum where you can post questions and get answers from colleagues. If you haven't taken advantage of the listserv, please do so today. The link has just been dropped into the chat where you can fill out a form and join. And if you have any questions on how to use it, you're welcome to email me and I can provide some assistance. My email is also in the chat. Also, your digital communications team has created a LinkedIn group and a Facebook page for the CSUPN, and we encourage you to take the opportunity to join it and reap the benefits of being part of that group as well. Moving on to our topic for the day, like I mentioned, I think we'll really just scratch the surface of this, but nonetheless, we are joined today with a few folks that we'll share kind of the research that we've done into the topic. And then we have a professional joining us, David Schutte from Voice and Video, who is a close partner of a few of our CSU EPN member institutions and has helped them out with some very great support in terms of their hybrid and virtual events. So moving on to our agenda. We're first going to sit down with David, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how he supported San Diego State with their very complicated and very fun Mission Valley celebration. And then we'll have a short discussion as to what are some of the common tools that events teams have to support hybrid events, and some of the ways that professional firms such as Voice and Video can support them further. And then in the second half, we'll be discussing some of the kind of general topics of hybrid events, particularly the variety in hybrid events, which I think is the most exciting part. They can look in so many different ways, but for some folks, I think that's also a little daunting because they're not sure which mode or which framework to use when they're putting together their event. We'll also discuss some commonalities that we've noticed in a lot of hybrid events. And if you take nothing away from today's meeting, that those commonalities are the things you probably should look for in a hybrid event. We'll also discuss the topics of participant equity and sustainability for hybrid events. So moving on, we'll go ahead and invite David here to tell us a little bit more about, before that, actually, we're going to discuss what we feel was kind of a good definition that we found for hybrid events. And essentially, it's a physical event in which an online audience also participates. And that being said, that's not, by no means a comprehensive definition, but it does get at the heart of what a lot of these hybrid events have. And to speak again to that diversity that I mentioned, there's a few examples here that have come kind of out of my sphere. And I welcome our panelists here to help us out and provide additional examples. And then I'll also invite the audience to share additional examples as well of any hybrid events that they've seen or that they're working on or that they're looking to execute. And I'll turn it to the audience in a second for you guys to come off mute and share, but you're welcome to type in any details of hybrid event examples in the meantime while I work my way down this list. So one really successful hybrid event that I recently was a part of was a kind of virtual / in-person tasting. We had groups of in-person people coming together in front of a screen where they were led by both a bartender and a chocolatier to do a tasting of chocolates and a cocktail making. So that event very much bridged both in-person and virtual audiences. And then the virtual audiences were able to engage with the bartenders and the other groups and some of the facilitators of that tasting. So it was quite successful in that respect. Another example could be a presentation to a live and virtual audiences simultaneously, where the virtual audience is able to submit questions to the presenter and engage with some of the attendees in real time as well. Another fun one that I've heard of is an asynchronous team marathon. Our HR department, and I think on some of the other CSU campuses, organized a walk across the state of California in which employees formed kind of walking teams or running teams, and they kept track of their activity on a pedometer or on a fitness app, and together they would log in their steps every so frequently, and the first group to reach whatever 1,000 steps it was to get across California was the winner. So that was another good example of a hybrid event in which you had in-person people coming together and there was interaction, and then they were also connecting with a larger virtual audience across this website. And then I'll even argue that, game shows and contests that had audience voting were probably some of the first hybrid events. American Idol was very much like geared towards the audience and having them dial in the votes for their favorite singer. So I think in that sense, that was also a pretty for the time, it was a successful hybrid event. So with that, I'll invite some of my other fellow facilitators to share any examples that they might have. David, I'm not sure if in me talking, you got inspired to remember a particular example of a hybrid event that you've helped out with or that you've heard of.
Not necessarily. I think you did a good job explaining what they are. Hybrid events, in my opinion, the name can almost be misleading because depending on the event, it can almost be like two events, one for the in-person crowd and another for the online. We've been doing, they're getting more and more popular. As you know, we've done a few before COVID, and then everything went fully virtual in the beginning of COVID, and now the hybrids are kind of coming back, and I think it's gonna be a huge thing going forward, just because it makes a lot of sense. You can reach a much larger audience than you could with just your simple in-person events. So I'm happy to sit tight if anyone else has examples to share.
Yeah, and I welcome anybody. You guys are of course welcome to jump off mute and share your thoughts. And I'll pause right here in case anybody's trying to do that right now.
I think for a lot of us, even before the pandemic, for me, for example, I support our foundation board for their meetings, and we've had people calling in. If we had board members that were out of our region, we would allow them to join via phone call, for example. And that's, I think I consider that as a prehistoric hybrid, maybe. We didn't really, they could listen in to us in the live room, and then they could participate also via voice. But and there were a couple of times when we shared our screen, our presentations, for example, like the agendas and other slideshows that they could see on their computer at home. So I think that's a version of a hybrid event.
Awesome. And I'll turn it over to the audience one more time to see if anybody else has thoughts or examples they'd like to share. And if not, that's fine, because we're about to do a bit of a deep dive into one hybrid event. So I'll invite Shruti now. Well, Shruti and Voice and Video provided a lot of support to our colleagues at San Diego State for a recent series of hybrid and virtual events around the groundbreaking of their new Mission Valley Center. So I'll turn things over to David to share a few more details on what are some of the ways that he specifically, or Voice and Video specifically, supported them, and any other information you might have about the event.
Sure. Yeah. The SDSU groundbreaking, as you can imagine, it was quite a large project. So there were a lot of people involved. The staff at SDSU is great, and they're always great to work with. So they had a really good team in place to make this happen. So our role was a lot of the design, both of the physical set and setup, as well as the virtual. So we went out and did multiple walkthroughs on site and figured out the best place for the stage, where we wanted everything to go. We worked with Ace Parking to figure out where all the cars would go, so they could have the best sight lines and hear the best. We did a big sound system out there, as well as a FM transmitter, so people could listen, drive-in movie style through their car radio. And then we also designed the platform to host the virtual part on, with the chat discussion and host all that. So we handled just about all the setup except for the stage. The Viejas, they are in-house there with SDSU, so they brought the stage and a lot of the crew. And then we did all the rigging and the LED walls and all the normal stuff you would do for a regular in-person event. And then on top of that, we built a little kind of a mini studio out there in the parking lot in order to broadcast it live. And that one was a little challenging. We didn't have any internet out there because we're in the middle of a parking lot. So we had to bring in a bonded system. And of course, as you would expect, everything was going fine during rehearsal. And then as soon as we put 150 cars or whatever it is, the Verizon dropped and we had to switch to the T-Mobile. So that was the plan in having the backup. We now have we got a 4-carrier bonded system after that, just because it dropped so quickly. We were happy to have the backup, but we would have appreciated another backup. So that was kind of a learning thing there with that. But it went really smoothly, and we had the multiple cameras, and everyone online was able to see and view and hear the whole time, and they had the chat in the platform there. The nice thing about doing it on a platform is you can download all that data afterwards, the chat, everything like that. You can get all the analytics afterwards, so you can follow up with people.
Yeah, well said. And it's a little deceiving because essentially it was a stage in a parking lot that's going to be the site of something else, and you had a bunch of kind of VIP people drive into it, and you're essentially broadcasting some of the remarks that were made from the stage. So it seems simple, but to your point, I mean, the way to make it successful is to provide kind of those multiple levels of engagement. You getting it both from the audio coming out of the stage through the FM radio in people's cars. And then, of course, there was that platform that was happening where folks were able to engage with one another and some of the SDSU staff and key folks as well. So it seems a little deceiving. It's a parking lot, but it's actually quite complicated.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing about virtual events and hybrid events going forward is you don't get the human interaction nearly as much, even with the chat and face-to-face on Zoom. So there's a lot of pre-production that goes into it, so you can grab your audience and keep their attention, they're not able to just sit around and chat with their friends and, depending on what kind of event it is, have cocktails or a meal or that kind of stuff. So you have to have pre-production events, pre-production, so that you have content to keep your audience engaged. And that is a big thing that we've been doing with a lot of our clients. So even if we're doing a hybrid event on site, we'll use our studio to get that pre-production content so that it's just really engaging.
Do you remember if the San Diego State event had one of those, or is that something that came maybe in more recent events? That pre-event content.
We've done a lot of these events for San Diego State. I know we had some pre-production content. I don't know if it was stuff that we did here or if it was stuff that they did on their own. But yeah, there was a lot of pre-production videos, and so we can still, with a hybrid and virtual events, we can still show as many videos and PowerPoints and all the same media that we do with live events. And we can do even more graphics, to keep people. I think we have a lower third that Jay could throw up right now, that it's just like a very basic example of some of the stuff, graphics you can do when you're doing these virtual events, just to give branding and keep people engaged.
Well, speaking a little bit more broadly, what are some of the other ways that voice and video would support client institutions, particularly in a university, in some of their virtual events? And this can be, San Diego State or otherwise.
Sure. Yeah, so what we have set up in the last year is we've opened the 2 studios and we created a virtual studio in our building right now. So we have it set up so that we can control everything going out from that studio. So we can come in with a client, whether it be UCSD or SDSU or whomever. If they want to be in the studio, they can be, and we run everything out of there. So it's set to be a full broadcast studio. So it's like watching the news or whatever, a TV show. We can bring in different graphics, different sources. We can bring in multiple people from Zoom or WebEx or whatever platform they want and isolate that feed so that you're not necessarily in a Zoom meeting. You're watching on a platform where we have a little more control over the interaction, and we can show videos and do everything without everyone else being able to they're not necessarily in control. We can kind of control what they see and they hear. And then we can run it from top to bottom like it's a live show. Well, as a live show, but like you're in person, but you're just watching online.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. And I think you teased us earlier with a kind of pre-show with a bit of a virtual walkthrough for that setup in that studio. Are we okay with showing that now?
Yeah, we can share that right now.
Sure.
Jay, go ahead whenever you're ready. So this studio is really set up to be more of an event space. So it's a separate building, which is what we really decided we needed last year, so that we can have enough space to have client representation here. So there's a green room and a conference room, an office, there's a tech room, a control room, and a studio. So we can all social distance, be safe, and still be in the same building without interruption by any other staff or anything. So it works really well for our, a lot of our fundraising events are out of here, and broadcast events where we can have staff in the control room, staff in the conference room, clients in the conference room, and still be safe and following guidelines. And it's worked really well. It's also set up, we can do green screen if this psych that's behind me, all this can be painted green, and then we do virtual sets. So we've got a series that's running right now called Cheer Match that finishes up at the end of the month, I believe. I have an example of that too, if we want to watch that real quick.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll go ahead and give you guys the spotlight here.
Okay. Jay, whenever you're ready.
What brought me here to Voice and Video Studio H.
Oops, looks like that was a technical difficulty. Jay, let me know if you have it. Oh, okay.
And in the meantime, we could even discuss how you might accommodate some folks or clients that aren't local. Lovely offices, lovely office space as well. But how say somebody is a little bit further upstate, how would your team go about working with them?
Yeah, so we've done a few of these with out of state. Recently we did one with a group that's in Seattle, and they had their own, I wouldn't call it a studio, but it was a conference room, and they brought in a stage and they had a camera crew, and we were able to connect everything through Zoom with them, and then we brought everything into our virtual studio through Zoom except for content. So they send us all the content, so we have it. So it's a high-res file in the studio ready to go. And then we'll do 2 channels of Zoom, one for presenters and one for production. And we'll just usually utilize a breakout room, so it's all the same Zoom link, and then I can bounce in between. And we will direct the show virtually through Zoom, and my staff is in the virtual studio, and they're doing all the switching and pushing it all out, and then the audience views it that way. So we don't actually have to have any clients on site. It can all be done through Zoom. It takes a little more pre-production. It takes some rehearsal time. Makes a huge difference. If you don't have that rehearsal time, there's a lot more factors that can go wrong when you're doing a hybrid, especially when you're not all in the same room. You can't fix things quite as quickly as you can when you're all together and in the same room. So that can be difficult. So the pre-production time is really key for that. But we're able to do everything virtually through Zoom or another platform if the client. We did one for a client who was sponsored by Microsoft, and so they insisted we used WebEx instead. But Zoom has really been the most user-friendly for us.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of a note to the audience here, I'll share that we had just about 0 rehearsal time for some of these videos, so that might explain why we had that hiccup right there. But
yeah, I think we set some in and out points because we were going to do a combination of all the videos, and then we decided against it, and I forgot to remove those in and out points. So that's probably what's going on there, Jay.
Yeah, so that's one tip right there for the file in terms of, the session is called Tips for Successful Hybrid Events, is allow plenty of time to rehearse and to practice and to make sure that everything should go as it should. So definitely voice and video provides some very robust support, and it's a good idea to kind of pursue if teams are looking to have very complicated events. But I wanted to get a sense of, how do you normally find teams? With what tools do they kind of already have available to them, and how do you guys build on top of them? You mentioned Zoom, which a lot of us already have and are actually quite proficient at. Perhaps maybe you could speak a little bit further as to how you find clients and how you build on the tools that they already have.
Yeah, so most of our clients have honestly found us, or they've been clients that we've previously been have relationships with. We really have not done any marketing since any of this has started. We've just been trying to provide solutions for the clients that we already have, because everyone was dead in the water when this all started and looking for a solution, and we just stayed on it and researched it and started testing and doing stuff right from the beginning. There are lots of tools out there now, like you mentioned. Zoom has kind of become the household name, almost like Kleenex. It's the go-to platform, and it's very user-friendly, which is nice. There are platforms out there with higher quality, but they are not as easy to use. Some of the other tools that I've used that we really liked is Remo, which is an interactive platform. There's a lot of interaction with that one. You can jump from table to table, see different people. You can do share screen. You can do a lot. The one thing they don't offer that's a little clunky anyway is the streaming part. So if we wanted to have everybody at all the tables watching the same thing at the same time, it's a little tricky, but that is a great tool. We have also, there's Paperless Post, if you've heard of that one. It's a very easy to use invitation, and it started out as a consumer thing for birthday parties, that kind of stuff, but in the last year they've really evolved to include a lot of templates for corporate invitations and registration platform, that kind of stuff. And then there's all the auction platforms for fundraising, Greater Giving, Better Unite. I really don't have a preference on any of those, so we work a lot with a local auctioneer, and I kind of let him choose what he wants, unless the client has already got a relationship with another one. The virtual platform companies that are out there, there's Hopin, Hubelo, there's a bunch of those. So far, I've found they're all pretty much the same. They've all got some drawbacks that we don't like and some benefits that we do like. We have our own virtual platform, which is very similar to those. And the thing I like about that is we have full control of that one. So we have a guy on the back end who can make changes live and do, make fixes and do everything. So if something goes wrong during an event, we don't have to call customer support. He just, he's right there and he's on it. Hybrid events, I find it's really good to just involve all the people that are kind of at the top level of whatever it is. So like for instance, Ace Parking, I let them decide where to put the cars. I don't want to decide where to put the cars. And they've been great in the events we've done as far as figuring out the sight lines and a safe way to get people in and out and all that. So it's kind of the same with any venue. If you're doing a ballroom hybrid event, we let the hotel staff figure all that out, where they're going to put people, how they get them in, get them out, and just really making it a group effort so that it doesn't all fall on one group, one person's shoulders or one team,
Letting everybody work to their strengths.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. I think I've learned tremendous just in the few minutes we've had together here. And I'll open it up here to everybody on the Zoom call here. There's already a bit of a robust discussion on different platforms in the chat, but I'll open it up to the audience to see if you have any questions for David and his team. I'll pause here for a couple seconds, and you're also welcome to drop them in the chat, and we'll reach out to Voice and Video and get those answered for you as well.
Oh, hi. My name's Sky and I work at UC Berkeley. And I have a question about kind of a perhaps a more budget-friendly sort of hybrid situation that could be set up for departments that run predominantly academic lectures, where we're considering possibly in the future having some speakers come in person and maybe live streaming just the lecture to a broader audience. And I'm wondering if you just kind of have like a general basic toolkit for those of us who maybe want to explore this, but don't have the money or the resources really to have a separate studio team set up. So that's kind of my first question. And my second question is, for smaller hybrid events, how many staff members on average do you think you need to kind of make sure you have a successful event? And that includes managing the audio as well as the online component and the in-person component. And thank you. And I can repeat any of that because I know it was kind of a long question, so let me know.
Sure. I'll start with the second question. Staff members, everyone's a little bit different. I would say the stuff that we have done, it's usually a minimum of 3 staff members because you need kind of an audio, a video, and a streaming. And depending on the space, if we're in the studio like we are today, I like to have 5. We're here with 3 today, including myself, but I like to have 5 staff if we're in studio. And it just depends on how detailed the event is and how many moving parts there are. As far as budget-friendly stuff, that's a tough spot because when you get into hybrid events, like I said before, a lot of times it can be 2 events, if it's a larger one especially. And people don't necessarily realize that not only are we doing the normal live event, which budget could change a little bit with the size of the audience, but there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be there. Now we're also doing the virtual side of it. So that's almost like a whole nother event, and it's addition to a budget. So we do get a lot of calls where, people say they had a $10,000 budget in 2019 when it was a live event, and they don't know why it's now $12,000. Well, you just added a whole nother component to it. So it's hard if you're doing larger events. If you're doing something small, there's a lot of resources out there. Like we mentioned, Zoom has been very user-friendly, and you can do a lot of different stuff with Zoom. It's somewhat limited, but you can do a lot of stuff. And you can most of the universities have a YouTube account already, so you can do live streaming with YouTube, or if you have a Vimeo account, those things, if you're doing a lot of it, and there are a lot of small ones, those can be pretty useful and budget-friendly.
And if okay, I'd like to jump in on this budget talk, because I know it really is on top of everyone's minds. And I think first and foremost is that you need to have candid conversations with your leadership, starting at the very beginning process of planning your event. bringing them to the table and finding out the expectation of the event, right? Because we know hybrid events are adding in, as Shruti just said, an extra component, and it's an extra expensive component, right? Production is one of those line items that tend to be higher than, our tablecloths or whatever. But in retrospect, if you're doing hybrid events, I believe the expectation, there's two expectations. One is to accommodate those who at this point in time are not comfortable attending in-person events, okay? So if let's say you have a reoccurring event and this one, it has never been a hybrid event in the past and it is now a hybrid event. Your guest list, let's say, has been 300 people in the past, attrition 10%, go ahead and do the math, not gonna do it. You are accommodating for, whatever, 200 people now. You anticipate at least maybe 50 or 40% of those people are not going to be comfortable enough. So you are now saving kind of that money on the food, the in-person stuff, right? The food, the drink, the rentals, parking, if you guys have parking on campus and that. So being able to kind of clearly estimate those numbers before coming to leadership and giving a clear expectation of what you anticipate this event to cost is going to be your most important first step. It's hard because I know, we have these, what is it, the champagne taste and beer budget when it comes to these, but in reality, hybrid events are most likely gonna be costly. And just being clear up front, like I said, is probably your best bet. And then working with your leadership, your campus partners, and your vendors to work on cost with you. Because I mean, we started working with voice and video just in December, and they've been very helpful. They're upfront, honest, clear on what costs are. We're clear about what our expectations and goals are with these events, and things go smoothly from there.
And I'll add the other variable to that is that not every event now has to be a hybrid event. There are some very successful, virtual, exclusively virtual streamable events. For example, the lecture series that Sky mentioned, that doesn't necessarily need to now get a big in-person component. As if you could have your panelist in virtually or in person in a studio being recorded. But again, that extra recording of having them in person and having the setup and having the lighting and all that extra things, and then if we're also concerned with budget, then perhaps we should just keep it virtual and focus on the content, because ultimately that's what people are after in perhaps that instance. So with that, I'd like to kind of bring back the slide deck. And we can maybe dive into, now that we've kind of scratched the surface, we can dive into some of what some of these bigger items that we have in terms of kind of the more conceptual framework of hybrid events. And essentially, looking at all the examples we've looked at right now, there are two commonalities that are seen throughout hybrid events. And the one is that there's a shared activity that's being done by folks, whether it's driving into a particular parking lot, watching something, or tasting something, or walking. There's one thing that's happening that unites everybody taking part. And then two, there's a platform that allows the different audiences to connect with each other. So they're able, both the people that are in person, that would be in person next to each other or 6 feet apart, and the folks that are joining virtually, they're able to naturally connect across space and time and come together. So that's what we feel are kind of two things that you of course need to have when you're thinking through an event. And it's probably a good idea to ask yourself the question, do I have these two things when you're beginning to conceptualize an event that you want to be hybrid? And if you don't, then I'm going to argue that you're not looking at a hybrid event, and you should maybe stop using that term to describe it. Moving on, you also want to explore the equity component. And some of the conversation that's been happening now is, how do we make things the same for the people that are in person and the people that are joining us virtually? And I think the answer there is that it's not going to be the same. It's a very different way of experiencing the event. And that's a good thing. People will choose the mode of experiencing that event in a way that is most comfortable or more appealing to them. So let's build on why they decided to participate in that particular mode. Whether that's, making the in-person space nicer or more conducive to networking, or it's making the broadcast or the virtual component just more convenient or easy to watch later. You want to build on the different strengths of the various modes. And in building kind of respectively the two areas, you create a fair experience for both audiences. And that's essentially the takeaway here. And of course, you want to have an honest communication with your attendees, both explaining what they can expect joining in the particular mode that they choose to join, and then how to make the most out of that experience. If the virtual audience are coming to your event or participating in a particular platform, you'll want to really underscore and provide education on how to use that platform to its fullest so that they can enjoy their time. And if there are some kind of restrictions for your in-person people, then you want to, of course, remind them of those and make sure that they're aware of. So you want to keep those in mind. And the slide deck will definitely be shared after as well. So again, returning to the item of budget, we may be in a situation where this event only happens this year. Only because we're in the larger environment of some folks not being comfortable coming to a large in-person gathering. So this might be an event that looks different this year and thus has an extra budget component to it. Or if this is going to live on for forever, then the conversation needs to be had on, this is now the cost of this event. And to keep it sustainable, we need to continue to provide that level of support to this event, or maybe even incrementally more as the participation or the duration of it grows. So again, another component to ask yourselves as you're thinking through some of these hybrid events, again, to make sure that they're successful. And then further moving on, you want to, again, just ask yourself kind of these three main things when you're considering a hybrid event. Is there that shared component that everybody, that activity, that content that everybody's doing or watching or enjoying? And is it possible for all your attendees, no matter how they're joining you, to interact with anybody leading a discussion or with each other? And is it an equitable experience for both of those? And I think no matter what the event, if you successfully answer these three questions, then you'll have a hybrid event. So a lot of philosophical, perhaps ideas there, but I'll invite anybody on the call here to raise any questions, and then I and fellow facilitators will try our best to kind of talk them through. All right. Well, so that's I want to go ahead and thank David very much for his time and joining us here today, and all the insight that he provided from in terms of production from voice and video. And I want to thank my other fellow facilitators. If we could just have the slides up one more time. I'll just want to remind everybody that of course, you're welcome to join us, to join the various resources that are available to you under the CSUEPN. That's our listserv, our Facebook group, our LinkedIn page. And of course, we will see you all in the fall. And you'll want to keep, again, sign up to that listserv so you find all about the conference that's happening in the summer, and all the fun deep dives that we'll do into some of these particular areas and hybrid events and how to make them successful then. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us again, and wish you all a great rest of the day and the best of luck in all your event planning.